Hello and welcome to Rob from the Internet Talks About Beer, a show where we discuss different styles of beer, beer history, beer flavor profiles. We give shout outs to breweries we think make exceptional beer, and we talk about whatever else comes to mind during the course of the conversation. I'm Rob from the Internet. Let's talk about beer. All right, so joining me today is one of my Twitter friends, goes by the handle of Laser Eric, I believe, or Laser83 Eric on Twitter, I think is what your handle actually is. If you could, Eric, tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into craft beer, and what you do when you're not talking about craft beer.
All right, sounds good. Well, my name's Eric. I'm more affectionately referred to on the internet as Laser Eric. You can find me on Twitter at Laser83 Eric. I am one of the co-hosts on the Galactic Dads podcast. We talk about beer as well as all kinds of nerd stuff and things like that as well. So I got into craft beer actually pretty early. I was probably 21 or 22. It was actually kind of a silly story. Me and my best friend were at a bar, and they had a beer on the menu. And at this point, we were Bud Light drinkers, just like everybody else when you're 21. And they had a beer on their menu called Skull Splitter. And we both kind of laughed and, yeah, that'd be funny. Okay. Well, next thing you know, we ordered a couple of them. We're like, this isn't half bad. And, the rest is history from there. I'm much older now, and I've tried about every style you can get your hands on. And, yeah, I'm a big fan of beer.
Excellent. So, in your everyday life, what do you do when you're not making a podcast and talking about beer and geek stuff?
So it fits right in with the drinking thing. I actually work in the car industry. I've been in the car industry for about 20 years, and I'm on the service side. I don't sell cars, so that keeps me young, I guess you could say. But but yeah, I mean, it's it's provided a good life. It's a good Monday through Friday gig, and I get plenty of time to do stuff like this, which I'm grateful for. I've got two kids that keep me busy and keep my energy in check. One of them's 9, one of them's 5, and they're awesome. But they'll run you all over town, that's for sure.
Yes, they will. I know that from firsthand experience. My daughter's a little bit older than your kid. She's 27. So, today we're going to be talking about Oatmeal Stout. That's the flavor of the day today. I will be drinking Serial Killer from Big Spruce Brewing in Nova Scotia. So, because I'm in Canada. What are you going to be having today, Eric?
All right. Well, I brought two with me. The main one I'm going to focus on here, I'm from the St. Louis area, and I've got our big brewery out here is the Schlafly Brewing Company.
They make good beer?
Rephrase that. I'm sorry. Yes. It's the big brewery that's not Anheuser-Busch in the area. Let's go with that.
There you go.
But I've got Schlafly Brewing Company's Oatmeal Stout. Doesn't get much more straightforward than that, but this is a tried and true out here. They brew it year round. You can get it at the brewery. You can get it at any grocery store. It's only a 5.7 alcohol, so you don't feel like you're getting beat over the head when you drink it like some of the stouts that are out there.
Yep.
Yeah, just a nice, smooth, 50-degree day drinking beer.
Yeah, so they also make an Irish dry stout, which is pretty good.
Yes.
That's the one that I think has a green label on it. It's been a while since I've had one, so.
Yeah, it's got the green label. It's got a lot of Irish artwork on it, or Irish styling artwork on it.
Right.
That's a decent beer. If you actually go to the Bottle Works in St. Louis, they'll have all of their standard stuff that they offer in stores, but then they'll have anywhere from 5 to 30 specialty taps, and they've had a ton of stouts go across there. They did this oatmeal stout in a couple of different flavors. A couple times I've been there over the years. They do a lot of variety, and most of the time it's reliably good. Yeah,
I've had several of their beers. I grew up in Illinois, so they're not unknown to us Illinoisans. But right. Yeah, the one that I remember the most was the dry Irish stout, because there was that period. There's always that period when when getting into craft beer where, oh, Guinness, and then what else is like Guinness? Back in the early days. So I've been drinking craft beer since the early 90s. So for 30 some years now. So I've like you, I've tried just about every single style that's out there, and most of them multiple times. For people who don't know, stouts are a dark beer that is what they call top fermented, which means that it's fermented at a warmer temperature as compared to lagers, which are fermented at lower temperatures. Comes in a variety of different formats. You've got your dry stout, like we were just talking about. We've got oatmeal stout, which we'll be discussing today. You've got milk stout, which is a stout with lactose added to it to give it extra sweetness. And then my favorite, the imperial stout, which has bumped up ABV and a little bit more bitterness to it. And then, you get to my absolute favorite version, which is the barrel-aged imperial stouts, where you get a whole lot of extra ABV and punch to them, but you get all that good sweetness and oaky goodness from the barrels. So, point of interest. Not everyone would know this, but the first known use of the word stout in association with beer was actually not referencing color. It was actually referencing ABV. So you could have, back in the late 1600s, you could have gotten a stout IPA or a stout golden ale, because it just referred to anything that was above 7% alcohol. It wasn't until the 1700s, like 1720, 1725, where it started getting a connotation for being associated with dark beers. And that was because of porters, which became popular in England. And a stout porter was typically just a porter style beer that had 7 or 8% alcohol. So that's, there's always that bone of contention that people always say that stouts and porters are different, but they come from a common root. So even if they're a little different these days, they started out as the same beer.
Well, people love to, debate that even still. And the barrel age conversation, I like how you brought that up, because a couple of years ago out here in St. Louis, it was like an arms race for who could make the best barrel age beer. And I'm blessed because I've still got a bunch of them in my cellar, and I'm, looking forward to the day when I open them up, because they're going to be awesome. But,
right.
But yeah, I mean, Schlafly even came out with one. There's a lot of local breweries around here, Perennial, Four Hands, a lot of them came out with barrel-aged stout beers. I'm a home brewer, or I was. I haven't done it in quite a while. Kids will do that to you.
Kids will knock you right out of that game.
Ain't that the truth? But my first home brew was a porter, and my second home brew was a stout. So I think a lot of home brewers, at least out here, they gravitate. IPA is usually the first one they do, but then they'll gravitate to a stout because it's, like you said, it's top fermented. It can be brewed at a warmer temperature, so you can brew it when it's still nice outside.
Yep. I
mean, heck, it's almost November and it's 60 degrees out here, so I mean, it's not like it's bad, but you're not talking about brewing a lager where it's got to be like 38, 40 degrees in order to do it properly. There's a little bit more forgiveness. And I think that's why a lot of people kind of run that way.
Well, yeah, especially people who don't have the money to invest in cold side. So like I have a glycol chiller for when I do my brewing, so I can do lagers and things like that. I have I have jacketed fermenters and the whole bit. So I can, if I want to do a lager, hey, great, I can let it sit in my fermenter for 2-3 months and slowly ferment. But honestly, I'm too damn impatient for that. So I very rarely do lager style beers. I tend to do ales. And lately I just like everybody else, I've been on the Kvike train. So I actually made a imperial stout using a specialized strain of Kvike yeast, and it was done fermenting in 72 hours and came out at 11%.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, it cuts the time for an imperial stout in half. It's like, I don't have to wait for it to finish fermenting in 2 weeks. and then let it sit
that's
for,
beautiful.
it's like 3 days and you're done. And, the thing that's funny about that yeast is like you pitch it and 15 minutes later, it's already bubbling and it just goes nuts and then stops. There's not even like a trickle off, like, with a lot of yeast. It's like bloop, 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 bloop. No, it's just like bubble, 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 done.
But yeah,
it is. It's very efficient. Where I live now here in Canada, I'm lucky that there's a yeast lab about 40 minutes from me, and they make all sorts of different strains. And they've been doing a lot of experimentation with doing mixed strains of Kvik yeast, and they've come up with their own varietals, and they have one that if you keep the temperature below 25 degrees Celsius, which is 83 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, 31.
It'll actually give you a clean finish. But if you let it go above that, then you start getting those fruity esters in it. So you'll start getting like the red apple and things like that. But if you can control the temperature, which having a glycol chiller makes it a lot easier, you can really get some clean flavors out of it without having to worry about it getting too fruity on you.
At some point, I would love to see your setup.
It's not that impressive.
It sounds like you're far more advanced than anywhere I got to, and I got what I would consider to be some good stuff. But
I mean, I have. I've been brewing on and off for 15 years, and I've amassed stuff over the last few years. So I've got SS Brewtech fermenters, and I've got I've got their glycol chiller and things like that. So I mean, I don't have a ton of stuff, but the stuff I do have, I invested so that I could do temperature control. So like my fermenters, I've got both hot and cold temperature control on them. So I can say, I need this to be, in this range. And if it's a degree or two, if it goes 2 degrees above or 2 degrees below where it's supposed to be, it determines whether it needs to heat or cool. So
that's awesome. That's very cool.
So getting back to oatmeal stouts.
Right. We get carried away on brewing very quickly.
Oh, well, and that's the thing about this show though, too, is we tend to go off on tangents, and I always have to try and get, I'm terrible for getting us off on tangents, and let alone some of the guests I've had. But so oatmeal stout, typically speaking, oatmeal stouts are a stout beer made with a maximum of 30% oats added during the brewing process. Believe it or not, most places fall well below that. You'll get an oatmeal stout, and typically they have somewhere around 5 to 10% of the total grain is oatmeal. If you go above 30%, you start getting bitter flavors out of it because that's just the way oatmeal is. The reason why they use oatmeal in these stouts is actually to give it a much better mouthfeel and head retention on the foam. So it gives it like this round, soft body when you're drinking it, and it's like really creamy and mouth coating and things like that. It's pretty cool, the fact that you throw a handful of Quaker Oats in your beer and it totally changes the mouthfeel.
Absolutely. We've got a brewery around here. It's called O'Fallon Brewery. They made, I don't know if they still do or not. I was actually looking for it while I was out this morning. I couldn't find it. They actually made a oatmeal cookie stout based on Dad's oatmeal cookies.
Oh, nice.
Which are popular down here, the oatmeal raisin cookies. And when you drink one of those, it tastes and feels like you're eating an oatmeal raisin cookie out of your grandma's kitchen.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it's crazy. But that's what I like about oatmeal stouts is a stout, as you alluded to earlier, the range of a stout is very high. And you can have some that you have to sit there and sip very carefully, or some of them that if you try to drink them cold, you're not going to like them. You got to let them warm up. Oatmeal stout is a beer I can pull out of my fridge. I love to camp. So if I go camping and I've got beer in the cooler, I can pull it out of my cooler, wipe the ice off, open it up. I can drink it. It's good in cold weather. It's good in relatively warm weather. I'm not drinking them while I'm mowing the grass, but that being said, if you're out on a decent night, it's a good beer to drink.
I don't know. I'll drink them while I'm mowing the grass. Yeah. So, typically speaking, for a stout, you want to drink it somewhere between 7 and 12 degrees Celsius, 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Traditional glassware is much like every other English ale is like your Nonic style pint, which is the pint that has that bubble at the top.
Yep.
I am not drinking out of one of those today because the one surviving Nonic pint I have is dirty at the moment. So I am drinking out of a beer can shaped glass.
Those are good too. I'm drinking out of the bottle, so I got nothing to say.
Yeah. Well, if you're a beer nerd and you want to know, typical color on this would be 20 to 50 SRM, which means that it should be super dark brown to black, and it should be opaque. You should not be able to see through it. It will not be clear like your Millers and your Buds. Typical bitterness, or I should say, perceived bitterness, is somewhere between 20 and 40 IBUs, which means that it's not bitter, but it might have a little bit of a bite somewhere at the end or towards the end of it. Typically speaking, it's somewhere between 3.5 and 6% alcohol. The one I'm drinking today comes in at 5.4%. So it's fairly light. Aromas and such, you might get coffee, you might get chocolate, you might get both. You might get roasted barley and with oatmeal stouts, obviously you might get some of that oatmeal, depending on if they're using raw flaked oats or if they've kiln dried the oats at all. You might get some of that aroma and flavor out of it as well. This one has a coffee on the nose with a little bit of chocolate as well, but the coffee is the main thing I get off the nose of this. And it's got a coffee hint in the mouth, but it's more chocolate when you're drinking it. But you do get that right at the end when you open your mouth and you go, you get that coffee finish on it. And this one's got a slight bitter finish on it as well, which is the way it should be. As far as aromas go, you shouldn't really smell any alcohol. If you do, something's gone wrong. You shouldn't really have any hop aromas either. Hops in oatmeal stouts or in stouts in general are there to balance out the sweetness. You're not necessarily looking for the aromas for them. And the only flavor you should get from the hop should be the bitterness on the end. Like I said, the malts that they tend to be coffee, the coffee like one. So you got your black malt, your roasted barley, your chocolate malt. Things like that. In addition to your standard pale malts and your flaked oats, obviously you have to have the oats in there, otherwise it's not an oatmeal stout. So, yeah, like I said, it should have a fairly round and soft body. Carbonation should actually be low to medium. Like most stouts, you don't want it to be over carbonated. I actually had one from a brewery out in Nova Scotia. It was a barrel aged imperial stout, and I don't know if they added extra carbonation to it or not, but it was so over carbonated it was ridiculous. And when I'm drinking a barrel aged beer, I expect it to have little to no carbonation because it's been sitting in a barrel.
Yeah, you almost expect it to pour like liquor, not like beer.
Yeah, this had a big foamy head on it and stuff, and I was like, it was just weird. I mean, the beer tasted fine. It was just weird to have all that CO2. And for people who don't know, excessive CO2 will actually make your beer taste more bitter. So it brings out the bitter notes in beer. So proper carbonation is key for flavor profiles. As far as other aromas go with and flavors go with oatmeal stouts and other stouts in general, you shouldn't really have any fruity flavors to it. You shouldn't really have any like those off alcohol flavors as well. So, but yeah, it's a good all around beer for a temperature ranging anywhere from say 30 degrees Fahrenheit to 65 degrees Fahrenheit for most people. You get above that, and then people start wanting their lighter beers, unless they're like me.
Right. Well, and you had mentioned earlier people who, they have their first Guinness and they like it and they think, okay, what's the next step from Guinness?
Yeah.
I would point people in my area and people that have access to it. I would point them to this beer, to an oatmeal stout, whether it be the Schlafly that I'm drinking or something like it, because it is accessible. I mean, the one that I'm drinking, it's a 40 IBU, so it's on the higher end of bitterness for this style. But in my opinion, the bitterness that you're getting is kind of a coffee style bitterness.
Yeah.
And you would expect beer to be bitter in some way, no matter what you're drinking. And I feel like this one fits that profile really well. It's a good, it's a good entry level. You're not going to hand a barrel age to somebody who's just getting into craft beer. You'll beat them over the head. Or maybe you will. It depends on how much you like the person. But yeah, this is a good, it's a good easy drinking beer. I'm going to piggyback off of what you said. This one, I get quite a bit more coffee, not as much chocolate.
Okay.
Do get a little bit of that. I've had some other ones. Founder's Breakfast Stout is a good example. It's a fantastic oatmeal stout. It's got more chocolate to me than like this one does. This is more on the kind of on the coffee end, but it's not overwhelming by any means. It's a good easy sessionable beer. If you're out on a cool evening and you're going to have two or three, this is a good option.
Yep.
Not too bitter. It keeps the balance pretty well.
The oatmeal stout's one of those styles that actually fell out of favor for quite a while. It was popular in the 20s and 30s, the 1920s and 1930s. It started losing its popularity in the 50s, and by about 1960, it was pretty much non-existent as a style anymore. And then there's a beer writer whose name happens to be Michael Jackson, no relation to the pop singer, but he's a famous beer writer, and he had a book called the World Guide to Beer or something like that. Came out in the late 70s, and he mentioned oatmeal stouts, and all of a sudden it started having a resurgence again. And in 1979 or 1980, Samuel Smith Brewing came out with an oatmeal stout, and it's a fantastic oatmeal stout. It's actually what most other breweries emulate when they're making an oatmeal stout, because it is a great beer. Yeah, I mean, you will never get thrown out for saying, "Hey, can I have a Samuel Smith oatmeal stout?" And the thing you need to bring up, if people are unfamiliar, oatmeal stouts don't taste like oatmeal. If they're done properly, they don't taste like oatmeal. I mean, the oatmeal is there literally to give it more body and a little more flavor complexity, but it shouldn't taste like you're eating oatmeal or drinking oatmeal.
Thankfully.
Yeah. If you're looking for food pairings, goes well with aged cheddar cheese. It goes well with Mexican foods, especially if they have mole style sauce on it. So it's going to be a complementary flavor. You're going to have that kind of chocolatey flavor in the mole sauce. You're going to have the chocolatey flavor and the coffee flavor in your beer. It goes well with sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes have a good flavor, good sweet flavor. The bitter in this complements and contrasts. The sweet in this complements, and the bitterness in this contrasts the sweet potato. So it goes pretty well with that. Goes well with cheesecake. If you're looking for a beer to pair with a dessert, it goes well with a cheesecake. So
I also know some people that drink oatmeal stouts and coffee stouts with ice cream.
Yeah,
They're big fans of that.
It would be good if you were doing a beer float. You could use oatmeal stout in your beer float, because then your ice cream, the sweetness of your ice cream, would go well with the bitterness that you get off and the coffee flavor you get off of the beer itself. local brewer that my wife and I like to go to does that every once in a while. They'll do beer floats, and I had they had I can't remember what, I think it was just a milk stout, and they paired it with a vegan coconut based chocolate ice cream, and it worked really well. It was super creamy, and the beer complemented the ice cream really well. It was nice.
And you got to figure there's probably not a lot of people that would order that off the menu.
Yeah. Well, it was a special thing that they were having. They were like, "Oh, hey, we're gonna do these floats," and I'm like, "All right, I'll try it with the vegan ice cream. What the hell?"
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, it's still ice cream, you know.
Right. Yeah, and I like coconut, so coconut based ice cream is not a big deal to me. I'm like, okay, sure.
If you ever find yourself in the St. Louis area, get a hold of me. There's a couple breweries around here. There's one right by my house that does just a killer coconut milk stout.
I love a good coconut milk stout.
Fantastic. Yeah, they do it like once a year, but it's really good when they do.
Yeah, I was drinking one last night. I was drinking one that was coconut, bitter orange, and dried cherry imperial barrel aged stout. Oh, it was fantastic. You hit the coconut right up front, and then in the middle you start getting that orange, and then towards the tail end of it, the orange kind of transforms into a chocolate covered cherry, and it was great. I mean,
wow.
It's also one of those ones that comes out once a year. This brewery does special beers once a year, and they change every year. So next year that one probably won't be back.
Oh man.
Yeah. Well, it's just one of those things. They change it up every year. They have their base barrel aged imperial stout, and then they do variations on it every year. So they have another one that's there's another brewery that I was drinking one of theirs that was peanut butter with an imperial milk stout, and it was like drinking a Reese's peanut butter cup.
Yes, the peanut butter chocolate beers, we usually have about a 2-month period every year where they get real in style, and we're right in that arena. And you would think, my wife loves peanut butter, which is really funny because she's not huge on these beers. I'm kind of the opposite. I don't really like to eat peanut butter. But if you give me a peanut butter milk stout or a peanut butter porter, I will I'll drink it. I won't slam it because I'm not a heathen. But, I will take it right away.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I will thank you for it because they're always good. We have a bar around here that actually will there's a couple different chocolate stouts that are out. And they'll actually add a shot of that peanut butter whiskey, the Screwball peanut butter whiskey, to the beer. And it adds a heck of a layer of flavor to it. You don't want to have more than one or two of them for obvious reasons, but it's very enjoyable. That would be something I'd be curious to pair with something like this.
Yeah.
I wonder how it would go. Because, peanut butter does have an inherent sweetness to it that might match the bitter factor here.
I think it would go well, at least I can say with the one that I'm drinking, it would go well with, because this has a fairly bitter finish on it, and I think that the sweetness from the peanut butter would cut that a little bit for people who aren't really big into the bitter finish beers. If you add a little extra sweetness to it to cut that bitterness, then it'd be a lot more palatable for people who are a little more sensitive to that.
Yeah, exactly. It'll kind of lighten the hit a little bit, I guess you could say.
Yep. Other breweries that make a decent one of these, the only one that comes to mind for me would be Firestone Walker. They make one called Velvet Merlin, which is a fantastic oatmeal stout, or at least they used to. I don't know if they still do. I haven't followed them that closely lately. I've been leaning more towards the local brews up here in Canada since I moved. So. But that's there used to be one by Millstream Brewing that was called Backroads, I think it was Backroads Oatmeal Stout, which was pretty good. And then can't think of any others off the top of my head.
Gotcha. I completely forgot about Merlin until you mentioned it. Firestone Walker has a little bit of a presence around here. I'll have to hunt down Velvet Merlin. I haven't had that,
Yeah.
but it's a good tip. I also have. I'll probably open this later. I've got this one's a little bit stronger. Founder's Breakfast Stout. I had
Yep.
mentioned it earlier. It's a double chocolate coffee oatmeal stout. But this one you're talking, it's 8.3% at 60 IBUs. This is a little bit stronger of a beer.
That's yeah, that's approaching imperial status. With
Right.
Yeah, I mean it's right there on the edge because typically an imperial beer is 9% or above. So yeah, sitting there at 8.8, they're like just skirting that edge.
Yeah, they're just seeing how close they can get to the line before they cross it. So that's okay.
One of my favorite U.S. breweries for stouts is actually New Holland with their Dragon's Milk Stout.
Yep.
And what's funny is so their Holland, Michigan is about 3 hours from here, 3.5 hours from here, I think it is, from where I'm at, because we're pretty close to the border.
Okay.
And it's a pretty popular beer here where I live. You can pretty much find Dragon's Milk everywhere that sells beer, which is pretty funny.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I've been up to Michigan. I have not been to Holland, but I took a little bit of a summer road trip up into Michigan to visit some of the breweries up there. A lot of good beer, a lot of really good beer. And it's funny how the styles diverge a little bit from what I'm used to in St. Louis. In the summer, it's almost nothing but sours are being released out here anymore, which it's an acquired taste, but it's not a bad one. It just takes a little bit of getting used to. Then we have our IPA phase, every year, and now we're getting into the stout season, which I love stout season in this area because we've got a lot of breweries. Four Hands Brewery comes out with chocolate milk stout, which I believe is pretty close to nationally distributed at this point. It's exceptional. They have a chocolate one, and then they actually have a peanut butter one. You'd mentioned that before. Both excellent beers. You get a lot of special releases and stuff like that. So not great for the wallet, but great for the beer drinker. Let's go with that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I was recording a show earlier today with one of my local friends, and we were discussing that craft beer drinkers, we spend a lot of money on beer. I mean, we don't bat an eye when they're like, oh, it's $9 for this can, or it's $30 for a 6-pack or whatever. We're like, okay. I mean, one of the breweries I tend to buy a lot of stuff from, I'll buy a case, a 24-pack of just their blonde ale, and it's like $60. I'm like, all right, but it's good. And it's one of those, when I just want a beer that tastes like a beer, I'm not looking for anything special. That's my go-to beer. And it's more expensive than buying like a case of Bud or Miller, or up here Canadian or Blue. But I also want a little bit of flavor. I'm not just looking for, 3 to 5% alcohol and no flavor. I want something to have flavor and the alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. If you're drinking to go crazy and party and, do what everybody does in college or whatever, that's fine. But if you're drinking because you like the taste of beer and stuff like that, I'm right there with you. And, when I met my wife, this is actually a really kind of a funny story. One of our first times spending time with each other, we went to a Scottish bar in downtown St. Louis. It's called the Scottish Arms. Great place. But everything they serve is authentic. So they're importing their beers from the United Kingdom, from Scotland, Ireland, those areas. She went in and asked for a Bud Light, and the bartender laughed at her. And she looked at me. She's like, I can't believe this dude laughed at me. And I just looked at her and I said, yeah, I can, but we'll find you something. It's not a big deal.
Right.
And now, we've been together for 16 years. She's picked up a lot of my habits. I haven't got her on the stouts yet. I'm working on it. It's a slow burn, but she understands better these days. You know, you're 100% right. Sometimes you'll spend $10 for a 4-pack. You know, sometimes there will be a special beer release and you'll be $200 poorer when you leave.
Mm-hmm.
But it's it's the quality of what you're getting.
Yeah, there's a brewery that's a couple hours from here that every year releases a set of barrel aged beers. It's called the Blood of Cthulhu by a brewery called Sawdust City, and I want to say it's like $5 or $6 a can. And then last year they released a barrel aged version of it called the Revenge of Cthulhu, which was aged for a year in barrels, and it was like $11.50 a can. I still bought the same amount. I just spent 3 times as much. But yeah, and like I was just talking with one of my friends. I bought a special release beer from a brewery. I don't know. They're like 19 hours north of us, because you can drive for like 27 hours and not leave Ontario. They have one called Deep Six. So they brew the beer, they put it in bottles, and then they drop it to the bottom of the lake that's near their brewery and leave it to condition for 6 months underwater. So yeah, it'll be dropped into the water at the end of this month, I believe, and then it sits for 6 months before they ship it out. I got last year's, and it was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's a gimmicky thing, but it's a great gimmicky thing because, one, they're this brewery up in this tiny town, that doesn't have a whole lot going on other than this brewery, obviously. So I want to support them. And two, it's pretty cool to say, yeah, I got one of these beers that sat at the bottom of a lake for 6 months.
That is really cool. You said it's a gimmicky thing, but it's in the beer community, I feel like that's not necessarily a gimmick more than it is kind of character.
Yeah.
Not quite the same, but we have a brewery about 2 hours from St. Louis. It's called Scratch Brewing Company. It's in a town called Ava, Illinois. If you get close to Ava and you blink, you're going to miss it. I went out there a few years ago because I actually went to a bottle share, and a guy came out with 2 growlers of beer from scratch, and I thought the beer was good, and he started telling stories about the place. Said, well, it's on a farm, and they grow most of their ingredients there. And I said, okay, I'll play along. Let's see what this is about. And he's 100% right. You go through there, and the road to the brewery, it's covered in trees, and honestly, like, I feel like I'm like listening out the window. I hear banjos or something. Like, you are in the middle of nowhere, dude. And all of a sudden it opens up. You have this beautiful farmhouse, and the beers there are like nothing you're going to have anywhere else. And it's because they literally grow everything they use on site. And going back to the gimmick thing, that's kind of a unique thing that really, as far as I know, only they do in the nearby area for us. But it's cool because I can say, number one, I can say that I've been there.
Yeah.
And you have to leave out of there with a couple of growlers because otherwise nobody's going to believe you.
Right.
You got to bring the beer back with you. But that kind of stuff is really, really cool to me and a lot of fun. That's one of the most fun things for me with craft beer is just seeing the different stuff, seeing how, it's almost a why not feeling. It's like, we can brew a beer with oatmeal. Why not? Nobody's saying we can't,
Yeah. No, yeah. That's exactly it. And the thing about, the thing about it is if they're doing something like that, it makes them a destination, and it brings tourist dollars to wherever it is they happen to be. Yeah, you might only be spending your money at their brewery, but that's still inside whatever county, inside whatever town. It's bringing something to the local economy, even if it's only to that brewer's pocket. It's still that local economy, which is something we really need to do, is support the local economies. And that's one of the things, like, we tend to go to breweries that are within 30 minutes of us, just because we try and keep things as hyper local as we can.
Yep, we do the same thing. when we send the kids to the babysitter and do a date night, we'll usually hit one or two breweries and, have a beer or two or have a flight or something like that. But it's the community. It's the sense of community that you get and stuff like that. And all the breweries out here, I'm sure it's the same where you are. All the breweries out here, they all know each other.
Yep.
They're all friends. Like,
yep.
Oh, those guys are awesome. You just came from there. That's great. Everybody's happy that you're supporting everybody else.
Yeah, that's the thing about the craft beer world. They're all in competition with each other, but they're all also out to make sure they all do well.
I love that.
So one of the local breweries that we frequent, they had a problem with their label system, so they couldn't label their beers. There's another brewery down the street brought their labeling equipment down for them to use so they could get their stuff labeled. I mean, they're literally like a block and a half away from each other, and they are competitors, but they're not competitors. So
I love that kind of stuff. That's great.
Yeah, it is. It's really cool. All right. Well, man, we have been talking for 40 minutes, and it's that time of the show where I say, hey, this is the end of the show. So if you watch this video and you enjoyed it, please click the like. If you feel so inclined to subscribe and click the little bell to be notified when new episodes come out. If you have any questions for me, or if you have any questions for Eric, leave them in the comments section below. I'll be sure to forward things on to him if they're for him. If you have any questions, comments, concerns in general, leave them below. If you have a suggestion for a beer or beer style you'd like to have me talk about, or if you have an idea for a guest you'd like me to try to get on, leave that in the comments section below. I'm always trying to find new people to talk to, because otherwise it's just me and nobody wants to listen to just me. So other than that, hey, I'm Rob from the internet. Cheers.
Cheers.